People are always saying moms are the real heroes. They're the ones that make the world go round, yada, 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 especially on Mother's Day. But then they don't put their money where their mouth is. Like you don't see many movies, books, or video games where moms are actually the heroes. And not only do we rarely get starring roles, movies often prove that our kids turn out better without us. Like Belle, Cinderella, Ariel, dead moms. Harry Potter, Batman, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, dead mom, dead mom, dead mom. I guess we should be flattered that lack of mom is perceived as the ultimate hardship. But if the end result of not even being present is all these amazing heroes, why are we out here working so hard? Welcome to the Family Lab podcast, where we embrace the fact that parenting and home management are one big experiment. I'm Whitney Archibald. It's Mother's Day this weekend, and I've been thinking about motherhood and the hero's journey. It feels sappy and cliched, but it really feels like motherhood is not just a hero's journey, but actually the original blueprint for a hero's journey. In this week's episode, we'll talk about that hero's journey and what that actually means for each of us beyond the idea of putting us up on a pedestal and holding us to impossible standards we could never meet. This is a podcast about imperfect people trying to figure out this parenting thing, not a list of things we have to do to be a good mom. Then next week, I'll release another episode about one specific element of the hero's journey, the mentor. I'll talk about some of my early motherhood mentors and what they taught me. And I'm hoping this will be the start of another episode or even a series with stories from you listeners about your own parenting mentors. For now, I'd love for you to send me your stories with either a quick video or audio clip or a text message to whitney@howshemoms.com or as a DM on Instagram, however you want to get it to me. You could also message me for a link to set up a time to tell me your story in my online studio. We could meet in person. I just want to hear about some of the big moments, the small moments, lessons they've taught you, just values they gave you, weird ideas that actually worked, whatever. Okay, back to the hero's journey. I became obsessed with mythology for a bit in high school, like the nerd I was. And that's where I first encountered the father of the classic hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, who wrote the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So he studied heroic stories from folklore and mythology from all over the world and mapped out this archetypal story arc, the hero's journey, that kind of applied to all of the cultures. Because folklore is notoriously male-centered, the classic hero is usually a man whose mother and wife stay home while he goes on adventures. There are notable exceptions, and many women have written about how the female version of the hero's journey is different, more centered on relationships and community, but still epically heroic. But maybe the reason they had to go on such far-flung adventures is that they did not have such natural access to it as we do as women. Like, just our everyday life is a grand hero's journey. And that's not, to say we can't go on grand adventures also, but just the process of bearing children and being mothers is in itself a hero's journey. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and so I did some Googling because surely I wasn't the first person to think of this, and that is true. I found some great essays about other people talking about this and even bought a book with one of those essays. It's called I'll Show Myself Out by Jessie Klein. In her essay, The Hero's Journey, she says, Campbell's conception of the journey begins with a potential hero who is just going about his life as normal. Texting and taking antidepressants or whatever. He receives a call to adventure to a place that Campbell describes as a forest, a kingdom underground beneath the waves or above the sky, a secret island, lofty mountaintop, or profound dream state. But it is always a place of strangely fluid and polymorphous beings, unimaginable torments, superhuman deeds, and impossible delights. Does some of that ring a bell, especially things like unimaginable torments, superhuman deeds, and impossible delight? I mean, all of those can certainly apply to motherhood. She goes on to say, for the first time since my son was born, having spent each day since feeling invisible to the mainstream world, over the hill like a Swiffer on legs, wiping his nose with my hand and not having sex, and generally functioning as a kind of automated milk and comfort dispensing machine, I began to entertain a thought. Is it possible I've been on a hero's journey this whole time? Is it possible I'm on one right now? Okay, first of all, Swiffer on legs, that is such a good description. So that's a great intro to the hero's journey. The first part of this journey is called the departure. The hero gets a call to adventure. He refuses the call. He meets a mentor. either human or supernatural, then, as Campbell puts it, he crosses a magical threshold into the unknown, what he describes as the worldwide womb image of the belly of the whale. So the hero's journey has an actual womb in it. Think of this first part in terms of the actual act of becoming a mother. We get a call to adventure, the pregnancy test, or the call from the adoption agency or the social worker. We're off into the unknown world of parenting. We've seen moms before, but we have no idea what it's like to actually be one. So the next step in Campbell's model is to refuse the call. That feeling of like, what am I doing? I'm not ready to be a mom. Ideally, we have a mentor along for the ride with us who can help us through this, either our own mom, a good friend, or a midwife. But then we have a very supernatural threshold where we become a literal portal for human life, and then the actual birth, where, again, to quote Campbell, the hero is swallowed into the unknown and would appear to have died. Giving birth is a very dramatic threshold crossing, literally at the threshold of life and death. And I think the turmoil of the adoption, surrogacy, and foster systems are similarly dramatic ways for a child to enter our worlds. And now suddenly we are no longer Whitney, Michelle, Marianne. We are mom. We are on to the next stage, initiation. So Campbell's version of this is very complicated. So we'll go with a more simplified version by the writer Christopher Vogler. So number 1 is tests, allies, and enemies. Number 2 is the inmost cave. Number 3 is the ordeal. And number 4 is the reward. I probably don't need to enumerate all the tests and trials involved with motherhood, like physical, emotional, mental health, juggling career and kids, keeping kids from running with scissors or into the street, making sure they don't harm each other, not to mention things like navigating stormy waters of disabilities, neurodivergence, education, and just generally crazy, insane behavior. Lots of rivers to cross and dragons to slay. Some of my big dragons along the way have been infertility and kids' behavioral issues and trying to keep them from beating each other up in a household of boys, things where I had no idea what to do or if these problems would ever resolve. The next step is the approach to the inmost cave, which I appreciate because seldom do our greatest challenges just appear out of nowhere. So there's the whole approach. They usually build to a climax gradually, like a divorce or a mental health crisis, infertility, a career explosion, even a move. And some of us will have a bunch of small crises, but many of us will have a big crisis or two that dwarf the others. Which brings us to the next stage, the ordeal, where the hero faces the greatest challenge yet and experiences death and rebirth. Am I saying that everyone will have a huge overarching ordeal in their life? No. But I feel like most people have something or several somethings. It's just life. If you've been around this podcast for a while, you know that I had a pretty sudden and huge ordeal when I literally fell off a 30-foot cliff while rock climbing and broke all my bones. I sure hope that was my big ordeal because I'm not sure if I can survive a bigger one. But just because your cliff wasn't a physical cliff like mine, it doesn't mean it wasn't super hard and significant. And maybe you haven't met your cliff yet, but life is hard, accidents happen, and the people you love can't live forever. Our road of trials, as Campbell calls it, has been preparing us for our big ordeal. And as hard as it is, motherhood has been preparing you for it all along. This ordeal brings us to the brink of death. We're not sure we're going to survive the heartbreak or the pain, but we do because we're strong. We're mothers. Perhaps, as Jessie Klein suggests, one of the biggest ordeals of motherhood is the shock of how completely she must annihilate herself to keep her child alive. She says, the sword that hangs over you is a sword of exhaustion, of frustration, of patience run dry, of her bladder practically exploding like a water balloon as she enters her third hour of sitting in a chair trying to get you to sleep. It's the sword of missing a meal because there wasn't time to eat while she was packing a diaper bag with the endless amount of stuff you needed to go to the park. The sort of sneaking one bite of string cheese while sitting on the edge of a damp sandbox. The sort of indignation at how little she feels like a human when she so often has to look and behave like an animal. And mostly, and this is the spikiest truth, it is the sort of rage, the rage and shock of how completely she must annihilate herself to keep her child alive. Kind of heavy, but also quite true. Like the depths of sacrifice that we go through as mothers can be the ordeal. Like it doesn't have to be an incident. It can just be the challenge of giving ourselves over so completely to these children. And hopefully we find a balance and we can figure out how to maintain our identities and not not completely be martyrs and, anyway, there's a lot we can talk about there. That's a whole other episode. But then the next phase is kind of complicated for moms. Um, it's called the ultimate boon, achieving our quest. And that's hard. And maybe where this analogy falls apart, because even when our kids graduate and move out, if they move out, we're not done with motherhood. There's no finish line on this quest. There are still tests, trials, and ordeals when we have adult children. There's still hard work and side quests. There's grandparenting in there. But there are rewards and glimpses of the ultimate boon all along the way. For one, there are a lot of joyful parts of motherhood, from baby snuggles and smiles to the hilarious things they say when they're toddlers, to their unbridled curiosity, the moment when you realize they actually have a sense of humor, the sheer delight of watching a human unfold before your eyes, just witnessing it all, and that moment when your child sees you as an actual human being and maybe even thanks you for your service, the time they realize you were right after all, and they actually apply that advice, and the times they choose to spend time with you. Once we've completed our quest, whatever that looks like, maybe it just means getting them all to the age of adulthood. The final stage is called the return. And the first part of that stage is the refusal to return, denial. For me, this hit hard with high school graduations. When you realize that your child is an adult and your relationship is just different now, and you can't stop looking at all those baby pictures and videos and wondering how your little boy can now pick you up and carry you around if he wanted to. You wonder if you've prepared them well enough, taught them what they need to learn. And then you have to confront that denial and remember that most of us will get to a point where the main day-to-day work of mothering is over. We, the heroes, must return transformed. Maybe this is a return to a more individual life after doing so much for so many for so long. Returning to hobbies and interests we didn't have time for in the thick of motherhood. Digging deeper into our careers or finding a new one. It can be a time when we reflect on how motherhood has stretched and transformed us to be stronger, more loving, more capable, more patient, more, just all the things. It's a weird time because a lot of the skills we've spent so long honing now seem obsolete. Things like how to get a baby to burp without fail, getting them to sleep, balancing equations, planning large meals, making homecoming corsages. Maybe we can still use some of these skills in a mentoring role, but we can also embrace new skills and interests. In Campbell's model, the final element of the returning stage is becoming the master of two worlds and gaining the freedom to live, which I think is a beautiful way to explain that stage of motherhood. So I'll end this episode with another quote from Jessie Klein's essay. The truth is that motherhood is a hero's journey. For most of us, it's not a journey outward to the most fantastic and farthest flung places, but inward, downward to the deepest parts of your strength, to the innermost buried core of everything you are made of but didn't know was there. And then she ends with, a mother's heroic journey is not about how she leaves, but about how she stays. Which, yeah, think about that for a minute. So I was going to just end with that quote, but I just want to reiterate that even if you're not feeling heroic right now, or, whatever stage you're in, you are a hero. You're doing amazing things. And if you're trying to be a good mother, you are a good mother. Thank you for joining us for the Family Lab podcast. And thank you to my assistant, Kimberly, and to my new assistant producer and editor, Miriam Brantley. And as always, a special thank you to my mom, Susan Singley, for playing the theme music to this podcast. She used to play this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.